I'm looking for an interpreter. I'm sorry. Okay. The third one I'm supposed to talk to, though, I believe. Not yet, he's not. Okay, we'll wait for Zoom to come in and hang on. Oh, wait, him, right? Nobody else is here yet. We're waiting for a third interpreter to appear by Zoom. Just sit tight, folks. Do you hear that? We also have Zoom victims that have come on, we believe. They're coming on. Is this, is this a victim too?
Do we know? I know, but I don't know.
Right, so I'm asking that.
I'm not here in the lobby.
Or not?
So maybe we'll just address it. If we have it, we don't object. Oh, yeah, obviously.
Ready?
Mr. Ortega, can you hear us?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, for some reason my in-court screen is not showing up. Sit tight, please. I can see him on my here. I can see him. Mr. Ortega, I've got you on my dashboard screen, but not the overhead screen. I'm trying to get that hooked up. Just sit tight.
Okay, Your Honor.
Can I try it? A second. Because the judge is okay. We're going to start. All right, we're going to go on the record and call Chippewa County Case 21 CF 819, State of Wisconsin versus Jose Dominguez-Garcia. Mr. Ortega, you want to raise your hand and be sworn, please, as well as the other
Yes.
interpreters as well?
You do solemnly swear that you will make a true, complete, and accurate translation of the statements made in this proceeding, so help you God.
Yes, I do. Saul Arteaga, Wisconsin Certified Court Interpreter.
Thank you, sir. The appearances are for the state of Wisconsin, District Attorney Wade Newell.
Your Honor, this is the interpreter. Is the party that needs interpretation in the courtroom, or because we have three interpreters, right?
I believe they were going to appear by Zoom.
No, there are two people in person in your courtroom.
They have the devices, Your Honor. Only Zoom is needed for the people on, the interpreter is only needed for the person on Zoom.
There's at least one person appearing by Zoom also who can hear you, sir.
Okay, so this interpreter will wait for that particular person. I just want to make sure when my role will start or it will start.
Julia Rodriguez Periona.
Okay, señor, ¿está ahí?
She's on mute. I'm trying to ask her to unmute, so she can at least acknowledge.
Señora, ¿tiene usted que decir si está presente o no, o si puede escuchar?
Buenos días, soy la nieta de la señora Julia. Ella en estos momentos se está conectando por este medio, pero sí
Anda.
está presente.
I'm the granddaughter of Mrs. Julia. Right now she is connecting, but I am present.
Thank you. All right, folks. The court will be using the services of a Spanish court interpreter.
Vamos a utilizar los servicios de los intérpretes judiciales.
After the interpretation function's engaged,
Una vez de que ya se conecte la función de la interpretación a través de esta plataforma,
Yeah, just for clarification, the victim by Zoom has interpreter services. So we would only need the interpreter, as was mentioned, when she gives a statement regarding sentencing. That'd be the only time we need the Zoom interpreter.
I'm obligated to make certain observations, Mr. Newell, okay?
ok, solamente el abogado ha mencionado de que la razón que hay un intérprete por video es porque el intérprete por video va a interpretarle a las víctimas cuando les toque el turno. El juez ha indicado que él es el que se va a encargar de dar las direcciones.
Interpreter, you will see a welcome screen that says, "You've been assigned an interpreter."
Okay, y el intérprete se va a poder ver en la pantalla que dice que se le ha asignado un intérprete.
At which time you should click OK.
Y en ese momento el intérprete debería hacer un clic y decir OK.
If you're joining on a computer, participants will see a notification.
Y si los participantes están utilizando una computadora, los participantes deberían ver un aviso que salga en la pantalla.
That says interpretation is available over an interpretation icon.
Que en la pantalla diría que la interpretación está disponible y saldría un símbolo que lo indique.
That icon looks like a globe.
Y ese símbolo tiene es la imagen parecida a la de un globo terrestre.
If you're joining over a smartphone,
Y si usted está utilizando un teléfono smart,
you may find language interpretation option under More over 3 dots.
usted van a encontrar la opción de interpretación de idiomas en una lista que está representada por puntos.
Everyone must select the preferred language channel.
Cada uno de las personas tiene que seleccionar el canal del idioma que se va a elegir.
Non-English speaking persons should click Spanish language icon.
Las personas que no hablan inglés pueden presionar el símbolo de español.
Everyone else should use English.
Y todos los demás pueden utilizar inglés.
The course now going to engage the language interpretation function.
Ahora nosotros vamos a aprender la función de interpretación de idioma.
I'll go back and call case again, 21 CF 819, State of Wisconsin versus Jose Dominguez-Garcia. The state is here with District Attorney Wade Newell. Mr. Dominguez-Garcia appears in court in custody with counsel Matthew Creasy and Ryan Mortel. We're here today for sentencing after the defendant was found guilty of first-degree reckless homicide. He pled no contest to that charge. Read-ins included first-degree intentional homicide of an unborn child and hiding a corpse. The maximum penalty for this offense is 60 years. DOC's recommendation is a 20-year sentence, 16 in, 4 out. Defense has varied recommendations. The court has considered victim impact statements from the victim's sister and father. I have, of course, read the PSI. 2 defense sentencing reports, one by the attorneys and one by Mr. Bradley Erickson. The facts of the case are involved, so normally I'd make a short statement about those, but I'm going to make a longer statement of the facts because I think it's important. We have the defendant's version only, and that is that he and the victim were fighting in his car, and he grabbed her by the throat, and while turning a corner, the car's momentum caused her strangulation and death. He advised at that time the victim was pregnant, and we're not sure who the father is. This occurred on or about July 2nd, 2020. The victim's body was found badly decomposed in a rural Triple County area on or about October 14th, 2020. Back up to the date the crime was committed, it appears that after that date, the defendant sought to make the disappearance not recognized by the parties. In fact, he wanted the family to know that she was still alive. To do that, he used her phone to simulate calls between himself and the victim to friends and family indicating that she was alive. He did go on to retrieve and cash her paychecks. He went ahead and changed her bank access card and took money out of her account, changed her PIN number, removed money from her account. He picked up her paychecks, used debit cards to buy gas, and stay in hotels. In addition, after the death, the defendant checked out various websites looking to see how long it would take for a human body to decompose, how to get into Mexico, sought out storage units, sought out housing in Mexico. At some point, he moved to Missouri, found a new girlfriend, started a family with her, has a daughter there. Finally, on November 23rd of 23, he was arrested on warrants that had been issued here in Triple County on August 18th, 2020. Initially, he was charged with 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, one for Rosalie, one for the child. He pled to first-degree reckless homicide. I do note that the medical examiner could not determine a cause of death. Did indicate there was no bone damage, although the defendant, I will note, did tell his new girlfriend in Missouri that he shot the victim between the eyes. As I said, the DOC is recommending 20 years, bifurcated. Mr. Miller, what's the state's position?
Regarding sentencing, I guess I would ask that the victims be heard from first before the
Agreed.
state.
I want to note that I have read dad's impact statement and sister's impact statement. This is the time for other victims who want to speak, or even those two victims again who want to speak. Come on up, have a seat next to Mr. Newell. Tell me who you are and make your statement to the court, please.
The first person to speak, Your Honor, will be the victim's father.
And I understand that his testimony will be interpreted by Mr. Ortega, is that correct?
I would assume so.
Your Honor, there's one interpreter in the room that would be more ideal if possible. And then we will hear what the person is saying, and I will interpret the other part.
Okay.
quiere puede añadir cosas más, puede explicar al juez lo que usted quiera, ¿está bien? Usted puede presentarse mejor. Él no puede hablar, solo no opine. Okay, pero usted puede añadir usted. Sí, está ahí. Okay. Ella también puede añadirle. No puedo entrar yo aquí, pero voy a solicitar, ¿está bien?
It might be best that you use a microphone, though, for us to hear you as well.
Utilizar el micrófono, la intérprete, para que podamos escucharle.
Go ahead, sir.
Puede proceder, señor. No necesita escuchar, yo voy a ser el intérprete. He's worried about not hearing, but I'll be doing the interpreting, Your Honor. Proceda. Como desea hacerlo. He's asking if he can stand up or if you want him to remain seated.
That'll be fine if he wants to stand, as long as we can hear him, as long as you can hear him.
Sí, en cuanto yo lo escuche, entonces mejor sentado, por favor. Puede proceder.
Señor juez,
Your Honor,
buenos días.
good morning.
El que me saluda, el que está presente, es padre de Rosa Chavarría Rodríguez.
I'm here and I'm in your presence as the father of Rosalie Cindy Chavarria Rodriguez.
Es bien duro estar presente en estos momentos.
It's really hard for me to be here present during this moment.
Al encontrarme frente a un criminal asesino de mi hija.
I find myself
José Eduardo Dominguez-Garcia.
I find myself in front of a criminal, the murderer of my daughter, Jose Eduardo Dominguez-Garcia.
Ellos eran esposos, son casados de acuerdo a la ley.
They were husband and wife. They were married according to the law.
Pero él se convirtió en un criminal, lamentablemente me arrancó el tesoro más grande de mi vida.
But he became a criminal, and sadly, he ripped off from me the biggest treasure of my life.
Que es mi hija Rosalie.
And that's my daughter, Rosalie.
Pero dentro de eso, señor juez, este criminal no tuvo compasión,
But Your Honor, this criminal had no compassion.
no valoró la vida de un ser humano,
He didn't put any value in human life,
de su propia hija o hijo que estaba en camino.
not even for his own daughter or son that was on the way.
A raíz de eso, señor juez, yo le llamé reiteradas veces, le dije, tú eres responsable de mi hija.
I called him repeatedly and I told him, you're responsible for my daughter.
¿Dónde está mi hija?
Where's my daughter?
Antes de eso, le llamaba a su teléfono una y otra vez. Este criminal no quiso contestar.
So before that, I would call on the phone over and over and this criminal wouldn't answer.
Y al final me contestó, no, Suedrito, tu hija se fue a su casa de su amiga.
And at the end, he finally answered and he said, no, dear father-in-law, your daughter just went to visit a friend.
Llevando su bolso, pasaporte, acta de nacimiento.
She took her passport, her purse, and her birth certificate.
Entonces yo le dije a este criminal, le dije, ¿dónde está mi hija?
So I told this criminal, where's my daughter?
Tú sabes dónde está mi hija, tú eres el esposo.
You know where she's at. You're the husband.
Entonces este criminal me dice, no, suegrito, yo ya, nuestra relación ya terminé.
He said, no, father-in-law, our relationship is over.
Después de 20 días, recién nos comunica de que ya había terminado la relación.
And after 20 days, he finally said, no, the relationship is over.
A raíz de eso le dije, tarde o temprano te voy a ver en la corte, porque tú eres el responsable como esposo de mi hija.
And because of that, I said, sooner or later, I will see you in court because you are the responsible as the husband of my daughter.
Pero entonces yo llamaba a su teléfono de mi hija dentro del horario de su break, que era de 10:45 a 11 del día.
I would call my daughter on the phone during her break from work, 11:45, between 11:45 and 10:45, I'm sorry, and 11 a.m.
Entonces mi hija estaba manipulando el móvil de mi, el celular de mi hija, este criminal, durante una semana. ¿Por qué? Porque siempre llegaban mensajes diciendo, no papi, no puedo hablar en este momento porque mi manager me va a regañar.
And this criminal was handling or messing with the cell phone of my daughter because then I would get a message that said, no, daddy, I cannot respond now because my manager is going to yell at me.
Cuando este criminal estaba manipulando él.
And this criminal was the one that was doing that.
Entonces, él, en la última llamada que hicimos, entonces me dijo, ¿sabes qué, suegrito? Voy a ir a la comisaría, a estación policial, a hacer la denuncia, porque se me va a venir todos contra mí.
So the last time I spoke to this criminal on the phone, he said, no, father-in-law, I'm going to go to the sheriff's department, I'm going to go to the police department because I see everybody's coming against me, so I'm going to file a complaint.
A raíz de eso, yo dentro de mi corazón, como padre, me sentía ya traicionado. Ya me sentía de que mi hija quizás estaba agonizando en un rincón o tal vez en algún lugar.
So me as a father, within my heart, I could feel that my daughter was probably agonizing in a corner or somewhere else.
A raíz de eso, este criminal llamado Eduardo Dominguez-Garcia, no sé cómo llamarlo, señor juez, honorable señor juez, se bloqueó todo su teléfono, bloqueó el teléfono de mi hija, lo hizo desaparecer.
So this criminal, Your Honor, and I don't know how else to call him, Jose Dominguez-Garcia, he blocked his cell phone, he blocked my daughter's cell phone as well.
Bloqueó todo,
He blocked everything.
sus redes sociales, Facebook, todo lo bloqueó.
Her social media, her Facebook, everything was blocked.
Pero nosotros ya teníamos toda la captura, toda la grabación, todo eso le hemos entregado tanto como acá en la corte de acá de Chipegua y lo hemos entregado también en la corte de en Harrisburg al señor detective David Frey. Toda esa información la hemos dado al alcance.
But by the time we had already made all the captures, we saved all the recordings and all the records, and we provided that information here in the Chippewa County and also with the other police department.
Como desapareció, nosotros solicitamos a la embajada, yo solicité para viajar. Entonces, como le tocaba que iba a venir, entonces este cínico, mentiroso, delincuente, asesino de mi hija, que no tiene nombre, disculpa si me estoy expresando mal, señor juez.
And because he went missing, he disappeared, I asked for permission to the embassy to travel. And then this man, this criminal, and I apologize, Your Honor, if I'm referring to him like that.
Entonces me dice, suegrito, no hay ningún problema, viaje usted, yo te voy a ayudar a buscar a Rosalí.
And then he said, that's okay, father-in-law, you can travel and I'm just going to help you out find Rosalie.
Yo te voy a ayudar a buscar, creo que se ha ido a Chicago.
I will help you out. She probably went to
Eso fue
Chicago.
Su versión.
That was his version.
Y lloró como, no sé, como que lleno de su conciencia sucia que tenía. De repente, como él me decía, de repente mi hija también estaba conmigo en un rincón agonizando. Pero este criminal nos traicionó, me mintió prácticamente.
And then he cried. I don't know. He was probably full of his guilty conscience. I just felt betrayed by him.
A raíz de todo eso, señor juez, le dije pues bien claro, tarde o temprano te voy a volver a ver en la corte.
And I told him clearly, sooner or later, I will see you in court, and I'm here now.
Como bloqueó todo, llegué a Estados Unidos en busca de alguna información que me pudieran dar con todo. Entonces, lo primero que fui a Richmond, me atendió el señor detective David Frey, todos ellos.
So when I arrived here, I tried to start searching for information, anything that I could get my hands on. He had blocked all devices, so I met with Detective Frayne from Risbol.
Exigiendo que de alguna forma que ubiquen al paradero, que capturen cuanto antes a este criminal, José Eduardo Dominguez-Garcia.
And in a way, I kept demanding to please find him. He needed to be detained.
Eso fue lo que exigí en Risbol al señor detective David Frey.
And that's what I required from the Risbol Police Department to the Detective David Frey.
Y luego hice esfuerzo pidiendo apoyo, pidiendo RAI, alguien que me hiciera un RAI para venir a esta corte a Chippewa una y otra vez. Hablé con el señor, no sé su nombre, me olvidé, está presente, creo. Le exigía al señor cuando va a haber alguna buena noticia.
And then I kept asking for support, for somebody to give me a ride so I could be here present in Chippewa. And I met with this gentleman, I have forgotten his name, but he's here present in court, and I kept putting pressure and saying, when will I have any news about her?
Sí, me abrieron las puertas, me atendieron, gracias a esta corte, no me ignoraron, no me han negado para nada mi derecho, porque era mi derecho estar presente y exigir justicia.
They opened the doors for me, they listened to me, they didn't ignore me, and I am thankful for that, and they respected my right, because it was my right to demand justice.
Esperé por mucho tiempo el resultado de ADN.
I waited for a long time to get a DNA result.
Porque demoraron muchísimo el ADN para confirmar realmente si era mi hija o no.
It took a long time to be able to confirm through DNA if it was my daughter or not.
Algunos allegados a sus amistades de mi hija me decían de que cálmese, señor Chavarría, señor padre de familia. Quizás acá en este mundo pasan muchas cosas. Hay veces declaran que está muerto, pero por ahí de repente todavía hay alguna esperanza.
And a lot of the friends of my daughter, a lot of people that had met her, they would tell me to calm down and keep hope, because sometimes they may say like, oh, this person is dead, but there may be some hope.
Tenía pocas esperanzas, pero lamentablemente un 15 de octubre, si no me equivoco, del 2020, después de 3 meses, si no me equivoco, porque la memoria que tengo fresca todavía, aparece en las noticias.
And I wasn't very hopeful. And then finally, on October 15th of 2020, if I'm not mistaken, my memory is still fresh, and then we finally saw the news.
Que a mi hija le encontraron dentro de una maleta, en un descampado, en una granja, abandonado, aquí en Chippewa.
That my daughter had been found inside a suitcase in an empty field in a farm. She was abandoned there in Chippewa.
Viendo las características que tenía mi hija a través de sus amigas, que nos ha enviado videos, ya, la verdad que yo entré en shock.
And after seeing the characteristics of my daughter that I had seen videos of her that their friends had sent me, I went into shock. I was in complete shock.
Mi yo, mi esposa, casi toda la familia, entrábamos porque eran pocas esperanzas, porque las evidencias eran claras.
Me, my wife, and my family, we lost all hope because there was no hope. The evidence was very clear.
Uno, su cabello.
Number one, her hair.
Dos, sus anteojos.
Number two, her sunglasses or glasses.
Las maletas.
And three, the suitcase itself.
Este criminal creó un crimen planificado.
This criminal planned this
Un
crime.
crimen, ya lo tenía en la mente.
He had it in his
Ya lo
mind.
tenía ya en la mente. No puede decirle que no fue casual, nada por el estilo, señor juez.
He cannot say now that it just happened casually.
Este criminal ya planeó todo.
Your Honor, this was planned. It was a revenge.
Porque llevaron un matrimonio tóxico.
They had a toxic marriage.
Un matrimonio que no había comprensión.
Maybe it was a marriage that lacked comprehension.
Pero nunca fue tan valiente, como humano, como un ser humano, decirle, ¿sabes qué, Señor? Nos estamos equivocando, o esta relación no va.
But he was never brave to come to me and say, you know, sir, this relationship is going nowhere. We made a mistake.
Tuvo esa valentía, decirme, no va. Entonces él se hubiera alejado, no importa. No importa compartir, mi hija.
He never was brave to say it to me and then walk away. It doesn't matter that she was pregnant. They should have ended.
No quitarle la vida de esa forma.
And instead he took her life in this way.
Asesinar, poner en su propia maleta. Es doloroso recordar, Señor, honorable juez.
He killed her and then placed her in a suitcase. It's very painful to remember all of this, Your Honor.
No entiendo, no encuentro la razón. ¿Cómo puede asesinar a su propia esposa y a su propio hijo o hija que estaba en camino?
I cannot understand this, Your Honor. I cannot make sense of it. How could he kill his own wife and his own child that was on the way?
¿Cuánto me hubiera gustado si él no quería simplemente abrirse su paso cada uno por su lado? No importa embarazar a mi hija. Yo hubiese venido a ese niñetita o mi nietito que estaba en camino. Yo me lo hubiera criado con buenos valores, así como yo le crié a mi hija buenos valores, con buena educación, buen ejemplo a la sociedad.
I wish each one of them would have just taken their own way and got separated. And it doesn't matter if my daughter was pregnant. I would have been happy taking care of my baby granddaughter or baby grandson and raised them just as I raised my own daughter with good values and good education.
Por eso, por todo ello, señor juez, mi hija vino a este hermoso país de las 7 maravillas con una meta, con un objetivo. Ella vino por la Universidad San Martín. Mi hija era profesional, estudió turismo, hotelería, idiomas.
And my daughter came to this beautiful country, the country of the 7 wonderful things. She came here with the goal. She had her mindset. She went to the university, San Martin. She was a professional. She was an expert in tourism.
Como vino con esa profesión ilusionada, mi hija, papá, voy a sacarlo adelante a mi hija acá.
She came with dreams. She said, Dad, I'm coming here. I'm going to get a better life for you.
Nos despedimos en el aeropuerto.
We said goodbye at the airport
Un 29 de noviembre del 2018.
on November 29, 2018.
Papito, voy a ir, vamos a sacarlo para adelante. Cuida el bebé. Ella va a ser tu bastón.
She said, Daddy, I'm leaving. We're going to go for a better life. Please take care of the baby. She's going to be your support.
Fíjese cómo anunció a mi hija las cosas, quizás lo estaba diciendo sin saber, sin presagiar de que esto iba a suceder.
Maybe my daughter, without knowing, had a bit of an idea what was going to happen because of what she said to me.
Hay veces me pregunto, ¿en qué momento se le cruzó este criminal que no tuvo compasión?
I wonder at what time this criminal came across her path that had no compassion and ripped her off from me.
Mi hija era una señorita de 23 años, madre soltera, no lo niego. ¿Por qué? Porque yo la conozco a mi hija muy bien, por
Ma-
dentro y por fuera.
My daughter was a 23-year-old young lady. She was a single mother. I won't deny that. I knew her inside out. I knew her very well.
Era responsable, luchaba por la ley que nos dejó.
She was very responsible. She was providing for her daughter that stayed with us.
Como vino por la universidad como estudiante, así como muchos de otros países vienen y nos abren la puerta a este país maravilloso, con esa ilusión, con triunfos, con esperanza para sacar adelante a nuestra familia y servir a la sociedad.
And she came to this country with big dreams, just as many other people come here to be a student with better hopes, to be a good citizen and move to a better life.
Pero lamentablemente alguien se le cruzó en mal momento, un criminal que no tiene compasión.
But sadly, she crossed paths with a criminal that had no compassion.
Por todo eso estoy aquí presente,
And that's the reason that I'm here today.
pidiendo justicia.
I'm asking for justice.
Lo más doloroso de este caso queda mi niña, mi nieta, huérfana de padre y madre, que hoy en vida clama a su mamá.
The saddest part is that my granddaughter is now left orphan, without a mom, without a dad, and she's claiming for her mom.
Yo soy padre y madre para mi bebé, tal como me encargó Rosalí.
I'm mother and daughter. I'm father and mother for her, like Rosalie told me to be.
Queda en tus manos.
She
Pero
said,
en algún momento
the baby's on your hands.
vamos a estar acá en Estados Unidos, voy a seguir trabajando full.
But her hope was for everybody to be here in the U.S. and she would be working for them.
Queda prácticamente huérfana mi niña, huérfana de padre, madre.
Now my baby is an orphan. She has no mom. She has no dad.
Entonces, señor juez, por todo ello, ¿qué esperamos?
So what can we hope for, Your Honor?
¿Qué esperamos aquí? Yo solamente vengo a exigir, pedir justicia con todo rigor, con todo corazón me pido, como padre destruido a nuestra familia por un cínico mentiroso, se burló de la justicia, se burló de las autoridades, escapó como un delincuente, pensaba que la tierra se le iba a comer.
So I'm just here, Your Honor, asking and demanding justice, with very strict rules. What can we expect from a criminal that he was a cynic and a liar? He escaped justice. He made a mockery of police. He tried to escape. He tried to pretend that the earth had swallowed him.
Por todo ello, señor juez, déjenme decir de que se merece la máxima pena. Yo exijo en memoria de Rosario, en memoria, pues estaría presente mi hijita que dejó Rosario, por todo ello, la pena máxima, señor juez.
Your Honor, I'm asking for the maximum penalty in Rosalie's memory and also in representation of my granddaughter. He deserves the maximum penalty,
¿Qué es la cadena perpetua?
and that's life in prison.
Eso es lo único. El día que yo me retire, regrese a Perú llevando los restos de mi hija. Es doloroso, pero tengo que asumir. Porque es triste darse una despedida en el aeropuerto, abrazos y esperanzas, y yo tenga que llevármelo a mi hija en un ataúd de aquí de Chicago hacia Perú.
So now I'm going to return back to Peru in a very painful and sad way, because it was sad that we said goodbye. We were hopeful when we said goodbye at the airport, and now it's my job to go back to Peru with her remains.
Yo le voy a pedir, yo no sé si me permite mencionar de que cómo puede haber, plantear, poner dos abogados a un criminal que defiende por esa esa razón en el mundo, en nuestro país, no solamente en Estados Unidos, en todo país que no existe, defienden a un criminal en vez de exigirle justicia, en vez de exigirle la verdad.
And I'm going to apologize for what I'm going to say. I'm going to take the liberty of saying I do not understand how can a criminal have two attorneys defending him. It doesn't happen just in this country. It also happens in my country. And we should all be asking for justice and not be defending him.
Disculpe, señor juez, le voy a dar un ejemplo en mi país. En mi país no defienden a los criminales, no defienden a los asesinos. Al asesino lo sentencian. Hoy en día se encuentra en debate la pena de muerte en mi país.
And I'm gonna just, I apologize, but I'm gonna set up my own country as an example. We don't defend criminals in our country. We don't stand for them. They just receive their sentencing. In my country, for example, the death penalty is back in discussion.
Solo así podremos cambiar ante la sociedad para que próximos criminales, próximos asesinos que haya, que matan a su esposa, que matan a su propio hijo, tengan siquiera un poco de temor, pensar antes de ejecutar, decir, ¿sabes qué? Si yo mato, yo no voy a ir pena de muerte para mí.
And this is the only way we can change society and deter criminals from taking their wives' lives, their children's lives. If they're going to do something like that, they're going to think, you know what, if I kill someone, then they're going to kill me.
Entonces, así se podría cambiar, a mi opinión, en el mundo entero, de que si un abogado defiende, dos abogados defienden a un criminal, ¿qué más quiere el criminal, señor juez? ¿Qué más quiere?
And this, in my opinion, this is how the world could be changed. If there's two attorneys defending one criminal, what else could he ask for? Everybody's standing up for him and defending him.
Así es, señor juez. Bueno, creo que he avanzado mucho con lo que tengo que decir.
I think I've said a lot of things.
Le pido de antemano una vez más, señor juez, de que le caiga todo el peso de la ley, porque la tengo destrozada en mi alma.
I'm asking you, Your Honor, one more time, that he receives the biggest penalty because my soul is crushed. He ripped her off. That criminal ripped her off from me. She was my biggest treasure. I love Rosalie. She was my support. She was the support of our family. We're destroyed. All our family is destroyed.
Que le caiga todo el peso de la ley, señor juez, señor honorable juez, que es la cadena perpetua.
So in the name of the Chavarria Rodriguez family, we're asking you for the harshest penalty,
Es el único
life in prison.
que lo pido.
That's all I'm
Eso
asking.
va a ser mi único consuelo
That will bring some
para
comfort
poder retornarme a mi país.
so I can go back to my country, taking the remains of my daughter. Can I please take a break and get some water? Can I continue later?
Ali, we want to get this done this morning, sir. How much more do you want me to know?
¿Cuánto más tiempo quisiera que le permita después? Maybe 5 minutes.
Can you go 5 more minutes?
¿Puede tomar un receso por 5 minutos?
Go ahead.
Sí, por favor. Can I have some water, please? Ahí está el agua, señora. Could I?
Bueno, señor juez, como le dijo señor honorable juez, como seguía mencionándole, como seguía hablándole.
Well, Your Honor, like I was telling you,
A esta corte
I came to this court.
Chippewa, una ciudad maravillosa.
I came to this beautiful city, Chippewa.
Una y otra vez, tal vez pasando hambre, pasando sed, pidiendo favores para traer.
I came different times when I was hungry, I was thirsty, asking for favors.
Solamente le digo una vez más, señor juez, que no le caiga la pena flexible que mencionan, puede ser de 15, 20, 40, 60.
I just ask you one more time, Your Honor, that don't give him a soft penalty of 15, 20, 40, 60 years.
Exijo la pena máxima, señor juez.
I request the maximum penalty, Your Honor.
Con eso, como le vuelvo a decir, viviré al menos teniendo un consuelo, porque yo ya perdí a mi hija.
And I want to ask you again, Your Honor, because at least it be a comfort to me, because I lost my daughter.
Nadie me va a reponer,
No one is going to give her back to me.
nadie. Yo ya no lo voy a poder abrazar.
No one. I'm not going to be able to hug her ever again.
Para nosotros ya no hay Día del Padre, especialmente para mí. Ya no hay Navidad. Ya no tenemos un cumpleaños, la casa.
To me, we don't have Christmas anymore. We don't celebrate Father's Day anymore. We don't celebrate birthdays. The house is empty.
Ha quedado vacío.
The house is empty now.
Ya no tengo ese consuelo de llamar, papi, ¿cómo estás? Estoy trabajando, estoy luchando, papá, cuídala.
I don't have any that comfort anymore that get a phone call and say, Daddy, what are you doing? I'm working and struggling, but I'm fighting really hard for you and for the baby.
Todo eso quedó vacío.
All of that is all gone.
Como le dije, este criminal, José Eduardo Dominguez-Garcia, sabía que mi hija tenía un bebé recién en camino.
Like I said before, this criminal, Jose Eduardo Dominguez-Garcia, knew that he had a baby on its way.
Que la muñequita estaba en Perú. Sabía muy bien, pero a él no le importó la vida de la bebé, no le importó nada.
And he knew that I had a granddaughter in Peru. He didn't care at all about the baby. He didn't care about anything.
Por todo ello, señor juez, creo que ya termino con estas palabras. Por todos los hechos, por de haber dejado escondido un cuerpo en una granja abandonado.
And because of all this, Your Honor, because of all the facts for what he did, like he left a body hidden in an abandoned farm.
Nos hemos indagado quién era este criminal José Eduardo Dominguez-Garcia. Hemos sacado su historial. Creo que lo tienen. Tenía como 10 denuncias.
And we found out who this Jose Eduardo Dominguez-Garcia criminal is. We found out that he had at least 10 penalties already from the past.
En uno de sus videos que nos hizo llegar, se lo hemos entregado a la corte aquella oportunidad, señor Erickson, si no me equivoco, Erickson está, si no me equivoco, le entregamos un video. ¿Cómo mencionaba de que no quiero faltar respeto, ya ustedes se imaginarán las palabras feas, palabras que no valdría la pena repetir, en el audio, agarrando su cerveza o su trago, que la peruana, que no valdría la pena, que no quiero repetir esa palabra de respeto.
He sent us a video that we gave it to Mr. Erickson Stark, and I really don't want to repeat those terrible words that he used in that video when he grabs his beer or his drink and he says that Peruvian girl was not worth it.
Estaba dentro de su auto odiando a su propia esposa.
He was inside of his own car hating his own wife.
Eso fue antes de cometer su acto criminalidad que no tiene nombre.
And that was before he committed that criminal act that there is no words to describe it.
Todo eso le hemos entregado para que investigue.
We turn all that in so they can investigate.
Todo eso está en sus manos de las investigaciones, me imagino las llamadas telefónicas, celulares, lo que hemos hecho, las capturas.
We all turned that in so they could be investigated. All those phone calls, cellular phones, all of those things.
Señor juez, creo que es suficiente solo agradeciéndole, si de repente cuando me toque algunas palabras, pero de antemano, señor juez, le digo una vez más.
In Your Honor, I think I said enough, but I want to, I'm very grateful. I want to thank you, and I want to tell you one more time
Que le caiga todo el peso de la ley.
to give him the strongest penalty,
Ese es el único consuelo.
the whole weight of the law. That would be the only comfort that I would take with me.
De haber batallado desde el 2020 hasta la fecha.
I've been struggling since 2020 until now.
Si no he podido venir anteriormente a esta corte, uno era porque estaba mal de salud, porque mi niña no me dejaba. Papá, ¿dónde te vas a ir? Yo te necesito.
And if I was not able to come before, is because one thing, I had bad health, and also my little girl would say, no, don't go, don't leave me, I need you.
Por todo ello, señor juez, convino pidiendo justicia, que le caiga todo el peso de la ley a este criminal que no tiene nombre, José Eduardo Dominguez-Garcia.
And because of all those reasons, Your Honor, I ask you again, please let all the weight of the law fall into this criminal, José Eduardo Dominguez-Garcia.
Si alguien pregunta sería uno mismo, por ejemplo, usted tuviera una hija, o usted tuviera una hija, alguien lo arrancaría de su vida, a su ser querido, a cualquiera de nosotros que nos sucediera que Dios no quiera, estaría en el lugar, exigiría la máxima sanción. Yo sé, yo estoy plenamente seguro que sí lo pediría al Señor o cualquiera que le sucediera a su hija.
And if, for example, if you have a daughter, and I don't wish this to anyone, but if someone takes your daughter's life away from you, you would demand the maximum penalty. If it was, you would do the same thing.
Estoy seguro, se pusiera en mi lugar, estoy seguro que pediría igual que yo.
If you were in my shoes, I'm sure you would ask for the same thing that I'm doing now.
Eso sería todo, señor honorable juez, justicia para salir.
And this is all, Your Honor, and I just ask justice for Rosalie.
cadena perpetua para ese criminal José Eduardo Dominguez-Garcia.
The death, life in prison for that criminal José Eduardo Dominguez-Garcia.
Gracias, señor honorable juez.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Gracias, señor.
Who else wants to be heard this
¿Quién
morning?
más quiere hablar?
This is, I'll let her give her name, but it's Kelly, the sister.
Sister?
Kelly, la hermana. Yes. Ella va a hablar en español.
Buenos días a todos los presentes.
Good morning to everyone.
No estar presente,
This is very hard to be present on this.
estar recordando cada momento.
And starting to remembering every moment. I'm sorry that I'm very emotional. It's really hard to be present here in front of a criminal. It's really hard to remember how he took away from us my sister. And how he ripped away from us my sister. She was a lady, a professional.
Vino con sueños aquí
She came here with big dreams.
para sacar adelante a una bebé que entonces tenía 3 años.
She came to work here and wanted to get ahead with her little 3-year-old daughter then.
Tenía la ilusión de formar una familia.
She had the dream to have a family,
De casarse, de tener hijos,
to get married and have children.
venir acá a un país hermoso
She wanted to come to this beautiful country.
y pues cambió la historia.
And
Entonces,
the story changed from what she wanted to do.
cuando yo conocí a Eduardo, a su esposo,
When I met Eduardo, her husband,
pensé que era una buena persona.
I thought he was a good person.
Cuando desapareció mi hermana,
But when my sister disappeared,
yo hablé con él porque le vi en línea, juntos como el mismo tiempo, le vi en línea cuando desapareció mi hermana. Y yo le pregunté a él,
so I came to talk to him because I saw
le di la confianza,
him online when my sister disappeared, and I trusted him.
le di la confianza como parte de la familia que me contara lo sucedido.
I trusted him, and as he was part of our family, I asked him to tell me what had happened.
Que lo que había pasado y él acepta que ella se había ido de la casa.
And I asked him to tell me what had happened, and he tells me that she left the house. She had left their house.
Y yo le obligué a que haga la denuncia porque yo estaba muy lejos, estaba en Perú.
And I made him to report her missing because I was very far away. I was in Peru.
Desde ese entonces yo siempre he vivido triste al perder a mi hermana.
And since then, I have been living really sad because I lost my sister.
Perder a mi hermana y perder a toda mi familia destrozada.
And I lost my sister, and my whole family fell into pieces.
Ver a mi sobrina sin papá, hoy en día sin mamá.
And I see my niece that she doesn't have a father and now she doesn't have a mother.
Y alejada de toda mi familia,
And she's
sin
apart,
tener un día de la madre, un día del padre, una Navidad, un año nuevo.
and she's far away from the rest of the family. She cannot celebrate Mother's Day, Father's Day, or Christmas, or anything.
Ya no es como antes, venir aquí, siempre buscando a mi hermana, a sus amistades,
It's
por
not,
internet, por las redes sociales.
it's not the same anymore to come here and look for my sister and be with her friends and look her online.
Nunca me van a devolver a mi hermana.
I'm not ever going to get my sister back.
Siempre que camino por ahí, donde estoy viviendo, siempre recordando dónde ha caminado ella.
When I go for a walk, and I remember when she used to walk by there too.
Es muy doloroso.
It's very painful.
Y estamos aquí presentes.
And here we are, here we are.
A veces recordando, a veces tristes.
Sometimes remembering, sometimes very sad.
Solo sé que me da fuerzas mi sobrina, que hoy en día tiene 9 años.
I only know that at least my niece, who is 9 years old now, gives me strength.
Mi madre, mi papá,
My mother, my father,
que han sufrido después de todo esto, lo que ha sucedido,
they have suffered so much after all this happened.
de la depresión, de los nervios,
They've been depressed,
de la
and
ansiedad.
they have been suffering with anxiety, depression.
Ellos lo único que me dan fuerza para seguir adelante aquí en Estados Unidos.
They are the ones that give me strength to keep going, to be able to go on here in the United States.
Solo le pido, por favor, que se haga justicia. Es lo único que pido ahorita, porque quiero que mis padres se vayan.
I'm only asking you, Your Honor, to give us justice. That's all I want out, and that way my parents can live.
Que regresemos a Perú.
And so we can go back to
Llevando a mi
Peru.
hermana y sabiendo que se ha hecho justicia.
So-
Porque todo este tiempo hemos estado sufriendo.
So we could go back to Peru, taking my sister with us, and knowing that there has been justice for us.
Con solo saber cómo murió mi hermana, en qué condiciones. Es horroroso.
And
Es
just
horrible.
Just knowing in what kind of conditions my sister died is horrible. It's terrible. And that's all. I cannot speak anymore.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
You step back full screen.
And the victim's mother should be the one on Zoom.
Her name is
Julia?
Julia Rodriguez. I'm asking you to unmute yourself, please. Mr. Rodriguez, can you hear us?
dígale que ha servido tomar aire. Un momentito.
I cannot hear her or the interpreter.
¿Puedes ver si su esposo todavía sigue conectado?
Sí, está conectado.
Dile que quite que está en silencio. Tiene que quitar el silencio. He's letting us.
Ms. Nichols, I think you're on mute as well. And Ms. Nichols, I see you talking, but we don't hear you here in Chippewa. I've got you up on two different sites. It says here, one is on mute, one is not. But either way, I can't hear you. She's unmuted up here, but not down here. I keep hitting that. Go ahead. Be patient with us. We're trying to do some electrical connections here. I got your message, Ms. Nichols. Thank you. Still having problems, Ms. Nichols. Not sure why. Oh, I hit this number here again.
Por favor, porque están tratando de resolver el problema.
Ok, gracias.
Sí, cómo no.
Try it again. Mr. Rodriguez, can you say something for us, please?
Everyone.
There we go. I got Ms. Nichols, I think.
Ok, se oye a la intérprete. Were you able to hear Ms. Rodriguez?
Nothing yet. So let's start over again. Ms. Rodriguez, what do you want the court to know before I pronounce sentence today?
Señora Rodríguez, ¿puede decir algo otra vez? A ver si se oye.
Aló, señorita, buenos días.
Hello, good morning. Were you able to hear that, Your Honor?
Yes, yes.
Muy bien, se oye. ¿Nos puede decir lo que nos quiere decir antes de pronunciar la sentencia?
Muy buenos días, con todo respeto, señorita. Aquí yo, como madre, buscando esta sentencia que va a haber ahora, que de mi hija, este señor que es asesino, ¿no? Yo pues, buscándole a mi hija, que aparece, nunca apareció mi hija.
Un momentito, señora, le voy a ir interpretando poco a poco, ¿está bien? Just give me a moment, ma'am, and I'll just interpret for you bit by bit, all right? Good morning, everyone. I just want to say, as far as the sentence goes, I'm a mother, and I was looking for my daughter, and this man, this murderer, here I am looking for my daughter, I'm not finding her. Adelante, go ahead.
Ya, señorita. Mira, yo en realidad busco que a este señor que lo ponga pues máximo de una pena de 40 años siquiera. ¿Por qué le van a dar una sentencia de 20 años, 16 años? Me parece, creo que es así, pero no es eso justo, señorita.
Well, I guess in reality for this man, I feel like he should have a sentence of 40 years. I mean, I've heard that they were thinking 6 years. That's not enough, and it seems to me that it should be longer.
Yo, señorita, mira, yo me siento bien preocupada, bien dolorida, porque perdí a mi hija, que es una chica universitaria. Esa chica ha estudiado, mi hijita, hacer hotelería, turismo, pero acá por la universidad lo mandaron a mi hija allá.
And I just wanted to say that I'm feeling very concerned. I'm in so much pain for having lost my daughter. This was a person, this was a woman who had gone to university to study literature. This was a person who had been recommended to go and study over there.
Yo me siento dolorida bastante por perder a mi hija. Tengo una niña que es de 9 años, que ella en realidad pide a su mamá, a su papá, pero ella no lo tiene, señorita. Entonces somos los dos, el papá y la mamá. Y por ese lado vengo luchando con ella. Y yo quisiera, señorita...
Un momentito, por favor. And I'm just in so much pain because of losing my daughter. And I have this little girl over here. She's 9 years old. She's asking for her mother, for her father. And we need to be now mother and father for her. And so I'm just saying, and I'm just asking. Sí, adelante. Go ahead.
Señorita, la verdad, a veces no sé qué decirle a ese hombre que es asesino. No sé cómo podría insultarle, pero lamentablemente perdí a mi hija.
And I don't even know what to say to this man who's a murderer. I want to say so many things to tell him who he is. But the truth is, I lost my daughter.
Ya, señorita. Yo, la verdad, señorita, pido justicia que a este hombre, ¿por qué razón lo mató a mi hija? ¿Cuándo? ¿Qué fecha? ¿Qué día? ¿Qué es lo que le ha pedido a mi hija para que lo matara en esa forma?
And I just want justice for my daughter, and I want to ask this man so many questions. Why? When? What date? What day? What could my daughter have done to be killed in this way?
Es la verdad, señorita, no ha tenido un pensamiento de matarlo a mi hija así en esa forma y llevarlo, como dice mi esposo, en una maleta, lo ha metido a mi hija para llevarlo, para botarlo. Mi hija no era un perro, mi hija no era un animal, así para que lo puede botar, así para que lo haga. No era mi hija animal.
And I just wonder what could have gone through his mind that he would do what my husband said he did, put her in a suitcase and just take her somewhere to get rid of her, to dispose of her. My daughter was not a dog. My daughter was not an animal. My daughter was not someone to be treated like that.
Ese pensamiento habrá tenido ya hace tiempo él, por eso lo hizo así. Vivía, creo que con su papá, su mamá, vivía, creo él ahí. ¿Qué es lo que hizo su mamá, su papá? ¿Por qué no le ha dicho dónde está ella? ¿O qué es lo que lo has hecho? ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué no me ha avisado a mí o llamar por teléfono? Señora, se ha perdido su hija, búscalo. ¿Por qué su mamá no me dijo? Y allá está su madre. ¿Por qué no me ha dicho? ¿Por qué ahora el padrino?
Okay, un momento, por favor. Just a minute, please. And these are the things that go through my mind. I keep thinking that he must have been planning this for some time. And I know that he lives with his mom and his dad. And I'm wondering to myself, Why didn't they call me? They knew I was looking for my daughter. Why didn't his mom call me? Why didn't they call? Why didn't the stepfather call and say, because they knew I was looking for my daughter. Why didn't anyone call and tell me?
Yo digo, señorita, mi hija se casó con ese miserable que no vale la pena, señorita. Se casó, ¿para qué? ¿Dónde están sus padrinos? Que siquiera un ejemplo, cuando mi hija peleaba o mi hija estaba en preocupación, ¿por qué su padrino siquiera no le ha ido a hablar? ¿O por qué no me ha llamado siquiera decir, señora, está su hija aquí? O me hubiera dicho, yo quizás hubiera hecho un esfuerzo para venir, para que mi esposo salga más rápido del Perú.
And I wonder too, my daughter, she married this loser, this man who's this worthless man. And I've been so concerned about her all this time. And I'm wondering why the stepfather didn't call, why her stepfather didn't call, didn't make any attempt to get in touch with me so that I could do what I could to get my husband out of Peru.
¿Cuánto dolor tengo, señorita, de perder a mi hija?
And I feel so much pain for the loss of my daughter.
Cada que llega la Navidad o su cumpleaños de mi hija, recuerdo que ella no está presente.
Every Christmas,
pregunta su mamá.
every Christmas, every birthday of my daughter's that comes around, I remember that she's not with us anymore. And then her daughter, my granddaughter, asking me where her mother is.
La verdad no puedo responder cuando me pregunta mi hijita, ¿dónde está su madre? A veces le digo, no, ella no es tu mamá, ella es tu hermana. Así tengo que engañarle a ella para que ella esté mejor, para que ella estudie, para que ella salga adelante. Porque si no se va a imprimir.
And I don't even know how to answer her. And sometimes I just lie to her and I say, well, that wasn't your mother, that's your sister. Because I just want her to be able to study. I want her to be able to go on with her life. I want her to be able to have a life. And so that's what I do.
La verdad yo, señorita, me siento bien imprimida por mi hija, esperando la llegada de mi hija. ¿Cuándo lo van a repatriar a mi hijita? Yo espero para hacer un poco, una tranquilidad, encontrarme, porque me siento bien preocupada por mi hija.
And honestly, I feel so depressed. And because I worry about my daughter. When is my daughter coming? When will we be able to repatriate her so that if she can rest in peace, so that I can have some peace? And I just keep asking myself.
Bueno, señorita, ese hombre mentiroso, ese hombre dijo que se había ido. Cuando le preguntamos, él dijo que se había ido un turco. Mi esposo llegó a buscarle. El joven dijo que no, yo soy amigo, pero no soy yo nada con él.
And this man is such a liar. Un momentito, just a minute. This man told us that she had gone off with this Turkish man, and my husband went to look for her, to look for him, and he said, no, I mean, we're just friends, but I was not close to her in that way.
¿Hasta dónde ha mentido, señorita? ¿Hasta dónde ha mentido ese hombre para que a mi hija lo asesina así? De verdad, yo me siento bien adolorida, señorita. Hasta hoy no puedo.
I just think about how much he lied and what a liar he is and what a murderer he is to murder my daughter like this. I feel so much pain. I feel so much pain.
Hasta hoy no comprendo, no entiendo, señorita, cómo lo asesinó a mi hija. Él ha estado seguro con su pensamiento de asesinarlo, como mi hija era peruana. Dijo, ¿qué va a encontrar los votos ya ahí que se pudra, habrá dicho este hombre? Por eso
And
la
I
llevó
can't-
lejos.
And I just can't imagine what could have gone through his mind. Can't imagine how he could kill my daughter. And I'm thinking he just thought, well, she's Peruvian, she doesn't matter, and I'll just take her somewhere and throw her and let her rot. That's what he must have been thinking.
Por esa razón, señorita, este señor lo botó lejos a mi pobre hija, pero ya tendrá su castigo más, tendrá que pagar su culpa, estar ahí preso, señorita. Algún día llegaré a los Estados Unidos a, ¿cómo se llama? Benboque, ¿no? Para ver que ese hombre se pudra ahí, señor. Y uno quisiera que...
And I think that's why he took her far away and let her just rot there, my daughter. And I just want him to suffer. I want him to be punished for what he did. And someday I am hoping to go to the United States and see him there where he is rotting.
Thank you.
Señorita,
Gracias, señora.
yo... Hola, señorita. Y a mi esposo... Ay, por favor.
Perdón, excuse me?
Mi esposo informó todo ya, cómo fue.
But my husband has already told me about everything that's happened and how it happened.
Yo solamente quiero que me envíen a mi hija.
I just want my daughter to be sent back to me.
Me dan la última sepultura a mi hijita.
So that
Me la
my
mandan.
daughter can finally be laid to rest. I want you to please send her to me. That's all.
Thank you.
Gracias, señora.
One more person wishes to speak, Your Honor.
This is a attorney representative of the family.
Name, please?
My name is Julius Andrusius, Julius Andrusius.
Go ahead, sir.
Judge, I will not take too much of court's time, but I would like to tell a few things. Jorge came to my office like at the beginning of this case back in 2019. He called. I think he's a Jorge father, Chavarria, and he told us that his daughter is missing. Could you help us? Could you help us? We need to locate her. We need to find her. And he was driving force in this case. He never gave up. I think at some moments we thought nothing is going to happen in this case because initially there was no body, then body was found. Person disappeared. The defendant was not located nowhere. And Hope was disappearing, but he would just call our office. He would come up with some different ideas. He was a driving force behind this case. He identified some locations where he could possibly be hiding, and we were advised rather not to go public with this case because he might get scared and hide even more. But ultimately, we decided just to go public, and we spoke with some TV stations, and we prepared whole public release. And exactly at that time, and I don't know if we already had this interview set up with Telemundo, and suddenly we saw on the news that the defendant was apprehended in different states. It was just like a miracle. We were just decided to go public with pictures, and we were planning to go in Mexico because we thought that the defendant is hiding in Mexico, and suddenly he was apprehended. So I saw father's pain. He would call the office, and he just did not want to give up on his daughter. I'm asking this court to, how to say, when he's gonna go back to Peru, when he's gonna take daughter's body back to Peru and they're gonna be burying her, that they would feel some kind of closure, that family would feel that United States justice system did not betray them as he asked this court. I know what he's asking, probably court cannot do, but he clearly and all family needs closure on this case. If he feels that everything was done what's possible to do, I think that will give closure to him, to father, and to mother, and unfortunately daughter. Her name is Hillary. Hillary, she's 9 years old, and as mother said, she's even afraid to tell that where her mom is. So Judge, I'm asking this court to be fair to this family and to do everything that they would feel closure after this court ends today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
I don't believe anyone.
For the defendant, anybody going to speak besides the lawyers?
I think we'd like to speak before him, Your Honor, if he can do allocution last.
I agree. I'm just wondering if anyone else can speak anybody before that.
No, Your Honor.
There's no argument.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state's recommendation in this matter is the statutory maximum, which is 60 years, 40 years of initial confinement, followed by 20 years of extended supervision. I've looked at the pre-sentence investigation. I've looked at the sentencing memorandum done by the defense, I guess kind of a statement of facts done by the defense in coordination with the defendant in this matter, and also the alternative pre-sentence investigation. Obviously, I'll focus more on this pre-sentence investigation done by the Department of Corrections. And while I don't disagree with the PSI writer's summary and conclusions about what is in there, I think it was a very well-written pre-sentence investigation. A lot of detail went into that, a lot of thought went into that to try and put the full story out there. Unfortunately, I think it's the DOC guidelines that gives us the recommendation that's in that PSI, not what is warranted in this case because of the totality of what occurred. That's the unfortunate thing that we have is, the court can see it as it's an alternative pre-sentence investigation. It's a grid. It's essentially a grid tells us, it's supposed to tell us what the correct sentence is in this matter. And I think in this particular case, a grid cannot tell us what the appropriate sentence should be in this matter. Obviously, everyone looks at this matter the correct way they're supposed to and outlines the alien factors, the gravity of the offense, character of the defendant, need to protect the public. And I'll go through those. I mean, it's the court, I'm sure, will go through those as well. But here we have 2 lives lost. We don't just have the one life. We have a mother and her unborn child. Both of those individuals lost their lives at the hands of the defendant. There isn't any worse thing that can happen to someone other than their life being taken from them. And obviously losing an unborn child at the hands of someone else is very devastating as well. When I look at the character of the defendant, I think too often we look at it and try and find the defendant's character by their criminal history and what the compass tells us. That somehow is the end all of someone's character is their criminal history and what the compass tells us. This is a situation where I don't think shows the true character of the defendant within that. We have a situation here where the defendant didn't try and help the victim. There was no indication that any aid was provided to the victim or any sort of medical care or anything was done to ensure that all options were taken to make sure that the victim could be treated as opposed to just disposed of like was mentioned. I mean, everyone talks about, the victims talk about the disposal of the body. That's truly what we have here, is the defendant having this incident occurring, abandoning essentially the body in the parking lot for a period of time, eventually getting a suitcase, and then driving all the way from the Dells area all the way up here, finding an abandoned farm, and then disposing of the body there. I think that shows his true character. And probably nothing shows his true character more than the fact that he blames the victim. Essentially, he says, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, that had the victim just left him alone, he wouldn't have had to put his hand around her throat and she'd still be alive. So essentially, he blames her for what happened in this particular situation. The defendant states that there was never any physical abuse with the victim before. That, however, is not consistent with the investigation. As listed in the pre-sentence investigation, there are multiple times where someone reported concerns that they had regarding the matter and concerns they had regarding the relationship that was going, seeing marks on the neck of the victim, a supervisor seeing the fat lip and a bruised eye, also report that the victim had gone to the hospital twice due to abuse by the defendant. So, as this court knows, not all domestic violence gets reported. Just because it doesn't get reported doesn't mean it didn't occur. When we do look at his criminal history, it may not seem like the worst thing in the world what he was involved in. But once again, I think the pre-sentence investigator writer points out the relevant part of that, his prior record, which is when the defendant is faced with a situation where he doesn't get what he wants, he gets aggressive, he gets physical, he's destructive with that. If he's not getting what he wants, bad things happen to other people or other property regarding that. I also think that we can't forget the fact that he was on probation at the time that this occurred. He absconded from probation then when he left to not resolve this matter and took off before being arrested in Missouri. It's not like he turned himself in Missouri. It was they happened to stop his vehicle and found out who he was and found out that he had the warrant here in Wisconsin. But when he was traveling there, when they arrested him, he had 2 different IDs with him at the time that he was arrested. When I'm looking at this, the one thing that came back to me over and over again as I reviewed this multiple times was, I think he shows his true colors when he makes the statement that accidents happen and that is life. And then what does he do with his life after that? He essentially goes to Missouri, starts a whole new life. So while his wife at the time is essentially rotting in a suitcase here in Chippewa County, and he's avoiding being held accountable for that because we don't know where he is, he's deciding, I'm going to just start a whole new family. I'm going to have a new child. I'm going to do all these things that doesn't seem to take him having any grasp at all on the seriousness of what he did. So he takes someone else's life and he goes on the run, and while on the run, he starts a whole new family. I think that shows his true colors in the fact that he just doesn't understand and just going to do what he thinks is good for him, and then, like he says, essentially, accident happens. That's life. That her life doesn't matter in the greater scheme of things. When I'm looking at the protection in the community, obviously, the community very much needs to be protected from the defendant, and the reasons why the community needs to be protected is looking at the choices that he had made in regards to this matter. So, first choice he makes is that he says, and I mean, obviously we have to take him at his word for this, and I don't know how much of it is truly accurate, but just addressing what he says, is he chose to grab the victim by the throat instead of pulling over the car. So essentially, he's saying they're in a car, there's fighting going on in the car, and he has to grab her by her throat to essentially protect himself. The reasonable thing would have been is to pull over the vehicle. If there's a fight going on in a vehicle, it's not just the two people that are in that vehicle that are endangered, it's everyone else on the road that if the person is distracted by having to deal with that situation. And so it would have been very easy for him to pull over to the side of the road as opposed to engage her by putting his hand on her throat. And then he put his hand on her throat knowing that she was pregnant. And so when he put his hand around her throat knowing that she was pregnant, he either didn't care about the child or intentionally wanted that child to be no more. It's only one of those two can be, one of those two things has to be true. Either he just didn't care or he did care and it was intentional in nature. He says, well, it kind of this only happened because he kind of lost control of the vehicle, and then he grabbed a little bit, or he felt his hand grab tighter and then a pop. This, once again, doesn't make sense. If he's losing control of the vehicle, sense would be he would take his hand off that person's throat, put it on the wheel, and take corrective action to make sure something didn't happen regarding that vehicle. The natural reaction is to correct what's going on with the vehicle, not to grab the person's throat tighter. And once again, what did he choose to do once that he heard that pop? Did he choose to render aid? Did he choose to see if she still had a pulse? Did he choose to see whether whether something could be done? Did he choose to call 911 so that someone else could intervene and maybe take steps to deal with the situation and so that she didn't lose her life? He didn't do any of those things. What he chose to do is eventually put her in the trunk, leave her in a parking lot before eventually bringing her here to Chippewa County, where he essentially disposed of her body. How does he deal with this then when he does this tragic thing? He essentially, in his own words, goes and drinks a lot and then drives back to wherever he's from. So even then, he's just killed someone, drinks a lot and thinks it's a good idea to get in a car and drive away from that after, I think he said he drank upwards of like 15 drinks during that period of time. So he doesn't care about the safety of other people, doesn't care about anything except for making sure that Jose doesn't get in trouble for what Jose did. And that's all he is worried about. Not worried about the victim in this matter, not worried about anyone else, not worried about protection of anyone, just doing what is best for him. So what is best for him is to lie to the family about where she is. What's best for him, lie to the police about the victim's whereabouts. And not just lie, but set it up to make it seem like she's still around and make it seem like she's still corresponding with him. And as the court recitated the facts to begin with, essentially takes all of her money away that she had earned so that he could do what he needed to do to avoid this matter and avoid being held accountable for this. Those are all the things he chose to do. He chose to flee. What he showed is that he had zero empathy or sympathy for the impact upon the victim or the victim's family in this matter. As noted, that first of all, that between July 2nd, when this occurred, a according to the defendant, and that actually makes the most amount of sense because when the remains of the victim were found, she was wearing the clothing that she was wearing just when she ended work that evening. So her death, July 2nd of 2020, until the suitcase was found, and that was just by happenstance that was found in October of 2020, the victim's family had no idea where she was, what was going on, why weren't they hearing from her. Then, obviously, before the body was found, the defendant already removed himself from the situation and tried to take steps to make sure that he wasn't held accountable for this. There's a big difference between taking full responsibility for what someone does and trying to mitigate responsibilities with lies and victim blaming and putting this on someone else. As the court mentioned, the court has to consider the read-ins that are in this matter, which is the first-degree intentional homicide of an unborn child and the hiding of the corpse. There's other factors to go into other than just the Galleon factors, and obviously I assume the court will take whatever steps it believes is necessary to talk about the rehabilitative needs of the defendant and any other concerns and mitigating and aggravating factors that the court thinks are important in this matter. The one thing that I think is missed with Galleon, and is part of our Constitution now, in fact our Constitution has been amended twice to provide more rights to victims, is victim impact. What impact has this crime had upon the victim, or in this case also the victim's family? I'm not going to repeat any of what was said here today by the family members. They can say it a lot better than me. They can put the true feeling into what has occurred to them, and I don't want to shortchange them by somehow trying to summarize what they said. I understand that the father wants there to be life without possibility of parole. We all know that's not possible. But what is possible is a statutory maximum of 60 years, 40 years of initial confinement, followed by 20 years of extended supervision. That is possible. That is the statutory maximum. That's within the range of what is allowed by this court, and it is warranted in this particular case. Obviously, when you look at any sort of case, you look at what's the worst scenario that you could have with a first-degree reckless homicide, and what's the least worst sort of situation. I think when it involves both the taking of the life of the victim and her unborn child, that puts it on the very aggravated side of that spectrum, and that the 40 years is appropriate. Obviously, no one in this matter is asking for probation, but the law does require that we look at probation as the first possible option, and I don't think anyone disagrees with the fact that probation would unduly depreciate the seriousness of the crime. My recommendation is not based upon the emotions of the family. While I'm very sensitive to the victims that spoke, and what they said is this can't be an emotion-based sentence. It has to be a legally based sentence based upon the totality of the circumstances and the factors the courts to determine. But I believe a recommendation of just 60 years of initial time in prison for 2 lives lost under these circumstances by this individual with this character would not be just. I think what is just would be for the defendant to be held accountable for the 2 lives that he took, and the fact that he has probably to this day never come totally honest and clean with what he did in this matter. What he does is do stuff to protect Jose, and only worried about Jose and not about anyone else. thing that gets me is when he's asked about the unborn baby in a jail call. He's asked about that by the new female that he's with. He's asked about that, and he says, well, that all this happened, I realized that it was not mine, and because of the anger and hatred, I resorted to what I shouldn't have resorted to. That once again shows his true colors, which is his hatred, his anger. The victim in this matter was going to pay. I think now is the time for him to be held accountable for how he made the victim pay and costing that unborn child its life, and believes that the 60 years, 40 years of initial confinement, followed by 20 years of extended supervision is appropriate. For conditions of extended supervision, ask that those be as outlined by the pre-sentence investigation. I believe there is a restitution memo that has been submitted in this matter. One of the conditions is to provide an approximate time and date of the victim's death so the family can honor her. I think it's maybe not conclusively, but as best I can determine from the evidence in this matter is that the death occurred on the evening after work of July 2nd. So obviously if the defendant can provide any further details regarding that, he should be ordered to do so that they can have closure regarding the matter. They have to submit to a DNA sample if not already done. They do any treatment, assessments, or counseling is deemed appropriate by the probation agent. They remain absolutely sober. No entry into bars, taverns, or liquor stores, or places where the primary purpose is the sale of alcohol. No contact with the victim's family and or residence and or their place of employment. He is entitled to 525 days of credit. Court costs in this matter would be $538. And I have talked to the attorneys regarding this matter, and it's my understanding that they are in agreement regarding the release of the victim's remains at this time, and that they don't need to be held, so that the family can make arrangements to have the remains go back with them. Your Honor.
Gentlemen, who wants to go first?
I will be going first, Your Honor. Thank you. Your Honor, as the court knows, there have been multiple independent evaluations done in this case with various recommendations. Those recommendations have been consistent at a sentence recommendation of 20 years in the Wisconsin State Prison System. The Department of Corrections recommends a breakdown of 16 years of initial confinement followed by 4 years of extended supervision. The recommendation offered by Bradley Erickson recommends 15 in and 5 out. We are asking the court to adopt the recommendation of the Department of Corrections for a sentence of 16 years of initial confinement followed by 4 years of extended supervision. Obviously, Your Honor, we have submitted quite a lot of information ahead of time. We're going to do our best not to just repeat things for you that have already been said, already submitted, but we do need to get through the 3 sentencing factors here. And just as a heads up, structurally, what we're going to be doing is I will be handling the discussion about the gravity of the offense. Then I'll turn it over to Attorney Creasy, who will be handling the other 2 sentencing factors and closing up for us here this morning. Now, when it comes to the gravity of this offense, Your Honor, this is a Class B felony. There are very high-level felonies being dismissed and read in. You've probably heard me say this before, but there is no such thing in our system as a felony that isn't a very serious crime. More importantly, when we have a felony where human life is lost as a result of those felonies, there's again no reasonable argument to be made that this is not a high gravity case. Rosalie Chavarria Rodriguez was 23 years old. She was pregnant. She was a mother. Among many other wonderful things about her, By every account, she was a person who was loved. She was a person who cared about those around her. When you read the words of her loved ones, when you hear them talk to us in court, it is clear that the hole that her passing left in the world is gaping. I read their statements. I listened carefully to the way that they discuss the pain that they're feeling. As a parent, the idea of experiencing what they're experiencing, the idea of her leaving a child alone without her in the world truly breaks my heart. And so I offer her family my sincerest condolences, and I know Attorney Creasy and Mr. Dominguez-Garcia do as well. This loss is a tragedy, not just because she was a person who was loved the way she was. Frankly, Your Honor, it doesn't matter if a person is a good person, a bad person, what we all actually are, which is somewhere in between those two things. When life is ended, what the world loses is the positive potential of that life. The ability for that person to do good things in the future, to positively affect people. That's why I adamantly oppose the death penalty generally, because when you end something like that, you lose the opportunity for them to change the world positively in the future. And I say all that because as I go through this argument, Your Honor, I have some important comments to make. I have some thoughts that I think are important for the court to consider. And some of those comments are going to be hard for some of the people in this room to hear, perhaps for all of us to hear. And we might not all agree with the comments that I have. But every argument that we make here this morning, I want everyone to know is made with the reality of what I just said, fully acknowledged, and with the acknowledgement of the seriousness of the tragedy that occurred in this case. And nothing that I say, nothing that has been submitted to the court previously is ever intended or should be interpreted as any type of minimization of the terrible loss felt by this family and her friends. Now, with all of that in mind, we are here today because Jose Dominguez-Garcia has pled to and been convicted of the charge of first-degree reckless homicide. He has acknowledged that he engaged in criminally reckless conduct that was so utterly unreasonable that it resulted in the tragedy of a lifetime. I can tell the court that when the proposal was made to resolve the case in this way, there was not much hesitation on our end to accept it. It wasn't a case full of negotiated haggling and you give us this, we'll take that. It was not like that. We received this offer. We accepted it in relatively quick fashion because, frankly, it's a result that Mr. Dominguez-Garcia knew was consistent with the truth. Had we taken this case all the way to trial, chances are, and I think very likely we would have asked for it, chances are there would have been lesser included offenses considered. This lesser included offense would have been considered, and frankly, that's what we think the evidence at trial would have shown. He prepared a statement for you with our assistance. It's 2 pages long. In that statement, he told you the truth of his experience and what happened in this case. He told you exactly what happened. He acknowledged that he engaged in a horribly violent crime. That crime, before we get to reckless homicide, before all of that, the crime that he engaged in was strangulation. Now, as this court knows, and Mr. Newell knows, and everybody who's been around the justice system for any amount of time knows, the crime of strangulation is a very serious crime. We can talk about all sorts of different scenarios. The reality is, in the state of Wisconsin, strangulation is a step higher than just a simple battery. I mean, we could talk about getting into fights, doing all sorts of things, striking another person with intent to harm them as hard as you can. It's a misdemeanor. Strangulation, if you impede the breathing of another human being for any amount of time, even a moment, it immediately jumps to a felony level offense. Why is that, Your Honor? We all know. It's because the human throat is that fragile. When you impede the breathing of another person for even the smallest amount of time, it has the possibility for any number of the muscles in the throat to fail and to never come back. If the trachea is affected in that way, the result that happened here is always a possibility. That's why strangulation is correctly such a higher level offense than even some of those other batteries I discussed. He acknowledged he committed that crime. He acknowledged he lost control of himself. He acknowledged that this was no one's fault but his own. Mr. Newell says he blames the victim. No, he doesn't. She didn't put his hands on her throat. He never said she did. He told you what was going on. He told you the truth of what was happening. Mr. Newell says, why didn't he pull over the car? That's a great idea. I agree completely. Things like this aren't happening when somebody is of a clear head and is in the right frame of mind to make a split-second decision like that. It's not right. I don't condone it. It happened in an instant. It happened very quickly. Could he, if he had the ability to go back and change that decision, of course he would. He can't. That's not how life works. It happened quickly. He does not blame her for what happened. Nobody put his hands on her throat but him. He knows that. But he also made it clear in his written statement that although he takes full accountability for that reality, that this was no one's fault but his own, he never wanted nor intended to end her life. He engaged in terrible, reckless conduct. And she died. And so did her unborn child. That is the definition of reckless homicide, Your Honor. Now, people are free to have their doubts about his story. They're free to say, well, I don't think he's telling the whole truth. But it's a story that is consistent with his conviction in this case. It's a story that is consistent with the evidence in this case. I have poured through it to a T. We've seen it all. What he told you happened here is consistent with that evidence. And frankly, at this point, it is a story that is uncontroverted by anything in this record. I know the court mentioned the statement that he made on the jail calls about a shot between the eyes or something like that. We know for an absolute fact that that didn't happen. We have the forensic summary of what the studies on the body showed us in this case. That didn't happen. There's no way it could have. Now, when it comes to that jail call, I don't know that it matters so much, but I think it's worth pointing out it was a jail call. It's not the highest quality of recording, and it's being translated from Spanish to English. We all know the impact of different dialects and all of those certain things when it comes to translating information from one language to another. And our best assessment of where that's coming from is that something was lost in translation. Now, I don't know, but the pre-sentence investigator for the Department of Corrections seemed to have some level of problem with the way that Mr. Dominguez-Garcia's statement was prepared for the court. I don't know what the court's feelings are on that. I don't know what the state's feelings are on that. But we made a choice in this case of, rather than having Mr. Dominguez-Garcia sit in a room and be asked questions when we aren't present to assist and make sure he understands what's going on and make sure that his statement is accurately conveyed and recorded, we made the decision to go through it like this. That wasn't his decision. That wasn't something he suggested or asked for. That was my advice, not him. So if, again, the pre-sentence investigators seem to have a problem with it, if the court or anybody else has a problem with the way that we handled that, I want to make it abundantly clear that that problem should be with me, not with Mr. Dominguez-Garcia. He was following the advice of counsel. And I want to explain to the court why that was my advice. I've been doing this for a decade now. You've known me since I was 21 years old, running around this courthouse with Attorney Ray Jack. And it's perhaps fair to call me cynical at this point, but I have read a whole bunch of pre-sentence investigations. And at this point, when it comes to really serious cases, I've lost faith in pre-sentence investigation writers to convey the accounts of my clients when those accounts are of the importance level that they are in this case, without injecting their own personal biases into the summaries that they provide for us. And what I will tell you, Your Honor, is in my opinion, in this case, she proved me right. He didn't give any discussion whatsoever to her directly beyond what we provided of exactly what his side of the story was in this case. During an unrelated discussion entirely, she was asking him about what he thought was an appropriate sentence in this case, and he was trying to convey that he has faith in you, and he was trying to convey his reasonable fear that you would just see him today as a monster who doesn't have anything positive about himself that you'll be able to see. And as part of that, he referred to what happened here as an accident. I have no problem acknowledging that that was a very poor choice of words. Of course, what happened here was not an accident. It was reckless. It was a terrible crime with dire results. Calling it an accident, I agree, it's not the right way to say it. But obviously, this isn't an accident. He told you of the purposeful actions that he took. He acknowledged the tragic consequences of those purposeful actions. And despite that obviousness, she took that phrase, those poorly chosen words, and swung them into comments about his temerity, called him abhorrent. And now they're in the PSI, and the district attorney is sitting next to me saying that those words, despite everything else that's been submitted, despite a 2-page report of exactly what happened, he says those few words are what show his true colors. They then say he's unwilling to be transparent in his actions when he submitted a 2-page written account of exactly what happened. Again, it proves my point. There's no right way to say what happened. There's no way that he can convey what happened here and have everybody say, okay, we feel better about that. It's impossible. It's not real. There's no good way to say it. And so when I have an emotional case like this that invokes the strong feelings of everyone, we weren't going to just offer him up to discuss the most emotionally charged part of this process without us there, so that the writer could latch on to any poorly chosen turn of phrase and suggest that he's not demonstrating enough remorse. Instead, we did it this way, and every word that you read in there was from him. Carefully chosen words without emotional personal bias being thrust onto them. And I will tell you right now, if anybody thinks we wrote it for him, they're wrong. You know us better than that. This was a long meeting. We watched him tell this story. We watched the tears in his eyes well. We watched him shake. It's his story. So with that uncontroverted account in mind, what can we conclude about the gravity of this offense? We already talked about the gravity's high. It warrants a very long prison sentence. We are recommending 20 years. We talk about the gravity of the offense. Of course, you're asking, are there mitigating factors? Are there aggravating factors? PSI is right. There's no mitigating factors here when it comes to the gravity of the offense. Mr. Newell's right about that, too. There are multiple aggravating factors. We recognize that. The dismissed and read-in charges alone include a whole separate tragedy of another life lost. Count 3 goes into the conduct after the fact. The lengths that he went to avoid apprehension are significant. And you can reach any number of conclusions about those things. You know, Mr. Newell thinks it shows his whole character, that he's just a terrible person who doesn't care about anything. That is one interpretation, that he's just an absolute psychopath who doesn't care about anything or anyone but himself. It's one interpretation. There are others. Could demonstrate at the time this happened, he was 22 years old. He was a kid who lost control, who had just made the biggest mistake of his entire life, who was terrified, who was panicked, and who chose flight over fight. And then we can say all we want. He had years to, turn back and come back and admit what he had done. At that point, he was in over his head. He didn't feel like there was any going back. And frankly, there wasn't. Once that immediate gut check choice was made, that snowball's rolling. There's no undoing it. Fear is one of the greatest motivators in the world. Our entire justice system is built on the idea of motivating people with fear. He knew what happened. He was terrified of what comes next. He made some terrible choices as a result of that fear. I have my thoughts. Mr. Newell has his. You are the only one in this courtroom who gets to decide just how aggravating those decisions were. He committed reckless homicide, Your Honor. He pled to reckless homicide. He's here to be sentenced for reckless homicide. I almost hesitate to talk about what I'm going to say next, but I think it's really important. Don't think that it minimizes the seriousness of reckless homicide. Point out that despite how serious it is, it does not carry the same gravity that intentional homicide does. They are different things. Both are terrible. One is objectively worse. It's one thing to engage in terribly reckless conduct. It's one thing to make really bad decisions that have terrible consequences. It is a whole other thing to intentionally take a life. That choice, that decision to intentionally take that potential that I talked about earlier, the potential for a person to do good in the future, the choice to take that away is the difference between reckless and intentional homicide. He did a terrible thing, but he never made that choice. His sentence should reflect that. 16 years of initial confinement incarcerates him until he's over 40 years old. At that point, his child will be an adult. He will have missed their entire childhood. It is not a slap on the wrist. It is not a sentence that doesn't matter. 16 years ago, I was 19 years old. All of the life that I've lived in that time, all of the experiences that I've gained, everything that's made me who I am today will be gone for him. 16 years. It's a long time. And it is our position that 16 years is the minimum amount of confinement necessary to not unduly depreciate the seriousness of this offense. Thank you, Judge.
Mr. Rishi.
Thank you. Your Honor, when we talk about character, it's obviously another sentencing factor the court must consider, but I do think it takes more of a back seat in this sentencing. Punishment, protection of the public, and gravity of the offense are probably all before character when we look at this. Now, there's a number of factors for the court to consider regarding character. We have personality, social traits, degree of culpability, age, education, employment, remorse, criminal record, and any other factor the court believes to be relevant when it comes to this hearing. It is very hard to dissect someone apart and boil down their character to a few phrases or to a few statements, especially when the court does not know Mr. Dominguez-Garcia outside of what you've been told or outside of this case. So we look at the background. We look at that he was age 22 at the time this offense was committed. We look at the statement he wrote, setting forth exactly what had occurred in that case. I note from the PSI, as well as from Mr. Newell's statement, that the family wants to have the approximate time of death so they can honor their daughter. That we did not know at the time the statement was written, but it's in there. It's in there as to what had happened, the date, the time, and what occurred. I do think that goes to character when Mr. Dominguez-Garcia hats that statement and puts it out for the court. I don't know if they've seen it or not. I don't know if they've heard of it, but Mr. Dominguez-Garcia will be making allocution. And my understanding is we'll be telling the family that information. Of course, when it comes to character, you look at a person's background, and I think it is important to note when we're looking at this case that he does not have a record of violence, of abuse, or domestic cases. It's not a situation where there's a sliding scale or escalation of behavior over time. There's not a history of criminal acts leading to him being in and out of the criminal justice system. I believe the PSI shows he's had one criminal conviction in 2017 for criminal damage to property, everything else being a traffic. I believe that history shows that this singular act was an outlier. It was something outside of the norm for him, something that was tragic, that never should have occurred, with abhorrent results. But as Mr. Erickson wrote in the alternative sentencing memorandum, he did not intend for her to die. He was not attempting to kill her, but his grabbing her by the throat was an intentional act. His poor, reckless decision caused the death. And it's that outlier decision why we are here today, Your Honor, for the sentencing for the reckless homicide, rather than a history of intentional acts directed at people. Now, many times the court will be told about a person's education or work history or goals for the future, and those are all appropriate when we're discussing probation or a shorter term of imprisonment. I'm not so sure those strike the right balance here, but briefly, Mr. Dominguez-Garcia came to the United States with his family when he was young. As you know from the PSI, he had a hard go of it going through the school system. He's about 50% fluent in English. He was able to obtain work. He was able to be a member of society until the time of this case. While that may bode well for extended supervision in the future, at this point, he has positive attributes, but those are going to take a back seat to what Mr. Mortel and I have recommended of the 16 years of initial confinement. And so that brings us to the rehabilitative needs. And that is an important consideration because it helps assess the necessary length of confinement. Every prison sentence in Wisconsin is based upon the bifurcated system, meaning there must be an attainable end date. Bifurcated system isn't meant to warehouse a person. It's not meant to punish without end. There is to be an end date for the reintegration into society. Prior to that end date, an offender will go through the programming so that behaviors may be changed. They may come back into society under the close full watch of their supervision agent. And this is not a case where behaviors cannot be changed. It's a case where there was a reaction that led to an abhorrent result, and there must be punishment for that and protection. But these are the considerations that must be addressed, Your Honor. I agree with Mr. Erickson as well as the PSI that the criminogenic needs that stand out are thinking errors, meaning it's errors that were on display during the entirety of this action in that car and the entirety of his reactions afterward. All of those decisions, as Mr. Erickson noted, were grievous errors in thinking, but they were not present prior to this case, meaning there's not a history of those errors that demand a sentence of 40 years of initial confinement. These were not needs that were ever present and cannot be changed. The DOC is well equipped with their programming in the prison to deal with those of cognitive behavioral, thinking for a change, dialectical behavior therapy, all aimed at helping an individual take control of their thinking and behavior and change the resultant action of behaviors. After protection, the punishment has been served. The behaviors that existed prior to confinement must be changed in order for reintegration into the community. He's not a person that has shown those errors throughout his life that demands such a long-term confinement to not be released until he was age 67. That brings us to protection. The obvious form of protection is imprisonment. It takes a person out of society. It will take him away from his family. It will take him away from everyone he's known. And it will certainly take him out of the lives of the people who are affected by his actions. And there's no doubt incarceration is necessary, but then the question is how much? And that is where McCleary's directive that the sentence imposed is to call for the minimum amount of confinement consistent with the sentencing factors. And there is a reason for that directive to the courts. The law does not allow for draconian sentencing. The law does not allow for eye to an eye or punishment eternal. It must be the minimum sentencing factors consistent, Your Honor. Our recommendation for 20 years of 16 years of initial confinement, followed by 4 years extended supervision, will punish Mr. Dominguez-Garcia. That is a straight incarceration sentence based on truth in sentencing with no chance for substance abuse program or the challenge incarceration program. That will punish him. That is a sentence that is in line with what the legislature has authorized the court to do in a case like this. I think it's worth pointing out that the state's recommendation of 40 years, quite frankly, would be greater than that of someone who was convicted of first-degree intentional homicide. As we know, first-degree intentional homicide requires life in prison, but if the court allows, a person may ask for the opportunity to be heard on release after 20 years. We would have no such ability if the court were to follow that same sentencing that the state wants, which seems to defy the logic of what would happen with a first-degree intentional homicide. As Attorney Mortel pointed out, there is a dearth of difference between reckless and intentional. We do believe the 16 years of initial confinement, which is a large portion of the total time allowed by the initial confinement, strikes the proper balance between punishment, the sentencing factors, especially the gravity of the offense, and the circumstances of this case. We ask that you adopt that recommendation, Your Honor.
Your Honor, before we go into the defendant's right of allocution, I've been asked if we can take a 5-minute recess so people can use the restroom and stuff.
Your Honor, if I can suggest, I don't expect Mr. Dominguez-Garcia's allocution to be very lengthy. Perhaps if we take the allocution, then the court can consider it during the break and get your thoughts together for your sentencing argument.
The court. Mr. Dominguez-Garcia, you want to address the court?
Yeah, I would love to speak to the court about it. And I read the statements from the family, and I paid attention to everything. And I want to tell the mother of Rosalie that everything happened on July 2nd at 10:30 p.m. I know that words will not change anything. It doesn't matter what I say. They will not change their opinion. But I'm here, and I will accept punishment. And I really feel bad for the family. I want to tell them that I feel so sorry, and I think that's all. What can I say?
All right, folks. Make it 10. Once you're back here, 11:05. Bailiff, you okay with that? 11:05. For those people on Zoom, we're going to take a 10-minute recess, back at 11:05 our time. All right, folks, before I start my normal sentencing format, I want to comment on a couple of things raised by arguments. Mr. Mortel asked the question, or took responsibility, I guess, for the way that the PSI writer from the DOC did their work. And I will tell Mr. Mortel that the way it was done, one of those things that bothered me about it, to be honest with you, it bothered me, because it came to me as saying, we're not going to answer your questions. Here's what we want you to know. And I think it may not have been that way at all, but it just gives that impression. So that, at least from my standpoint, there are better ways to do it. I'm not sure there are better ways to do it, but that's the downside of that. The other thing I wanted to comment about, Mr. Newell brought up, and I think it was accurate to a point. I think that Galleon was the case that talks about the three fundamental factors, but that predates Marcy's Law and all the victim impact information that we've now been told to consider. So I just want everybody to know that I think that does require the court to address victim impact as well. So having said all that, Mr. Dominguez-Garcia, I'm going to tell you what I do. Your lawyers know this, but I'm going to tell you what I do. I go through, when I get the PSI, I go through and I read it, I highlight it, I tag certain things. In your case, I got the alternate PSI, same thing, go through, tag it, highlight some things. And in this case, I had 2 alternate PSIs, both the one your lawyers did and the one that Mr. Erickson did. I also go through and reread the victim impact statements, and I go from that. In this case, I did that checklist 2 or 3 different times. In this case, I transferred my checklist to a written form, so I didn't miss anything. But I do all that because I think it's important for me to make sure I address every point and make sure that what I do is appropriate. In this case, I look at what are the several general objectives that I'm trying to address today. Protect the community, up to a point that's appropriate. On the other hand, this case is pretty fact sensitive. It's important, but not the top of my list. Rehabilitation, likewise. Yeah, but it's not top of my list. What makes sense to me is trying to make sure the defendant's punished, trying to give the victim's family some sort of closure. I hope I meet that by my comments today. In arriving at the appropriate sentence, and lawyers have addressed these issues separately themselves, but I'm going to give you my take on this. I look at a number of things. As I said, the compass is used a lot by both the alternate PSI writer, Erickson, as well as the DOC writer. And sometimes compass, I think, misses the point. In this case, I agree with the compass when it tells me that Mr. Dominguez-Garcia is probably going to minimize his actions and not accept responsibility. But it also went on to say that he's not likely to have problems managing anger or controlling his anger. I think the previous conviction, not getting moved to a different department at his job, he reacted by breaking out several TVs. There were reports of him sending Rosalie to the doctor's office a couple times. That's hearsay, and I don't know how it came up exactly, but I don't think that Compass was accurate when it commented that he wouldn't have a problem with that. So I go back and look at his past criminal offenses. As pointed out by defense, he was on probation for criminal damage to property. He reacted to not getting moved and destroyed a bunch of televisions. Next factor is history of undesirable behavior. Not much. He has that one criminal conviction, as we said. Again, the girlfriend's girlfriend talked about damage to Rosalie before this. Not as extensive as sometimes we see. Third objective is to look at his personality, his character, social traits. Again, the compass points out he's unlikely to accept responsibility for his actions. I think that happened here. Minimize the seriousness of his act and the consequences. He recognized that his daughter now would be raised without a father in her life. However, he doesn't seem to recognize the fact that Rosalie's 9-year-old daughter will not have either parent, nor will the child that Rosalie was carrying ever survive. Again, those opportunities that Mr. Mortel talked about are gone. I think he had a plan after the incident. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But he didn't consider those kind of things, and that, I think, tells a lot about his character. I've got to look at the viciousness or aggravated nature of his crime. As pointed out by Mr. Krishi, there are not many crimes that are more vicious or aggravated. In this case, not only that homicide by itself, but how it affected the family. As I commented, her family is devastated. It's obvious that mom and dad and sister are trying to move on. I want to say to Dad, in your victim witness statement, when you wrote out, you said you didn't have a reason to live. I'm telling you, you got a 9-year-old granddaughter that needs you now more than ever before. You have a reason. The degree of culpability. Instead of taking responsibility, he fled and took a great deal of time to hide the corpse and make his getaway. He actually pled to a reduced crime 4 years after the crime. When he was arrested, he had 2 IDs on him that belonged to 2 different people that resembled him. I'm not sure what his plan was, but I believe he had a plan. I've got to look at his demeanor at trial. There was no trial. Today he addressed the victim's family. How much I give that, how much weight I give to that, I'm not sure. But I look beyond that. I look at he's 28 years old, good health. I believe he only has the 1 child. It was noted he's got an 11th grade education, but again, as Mr. Martel pointed out, or Mr. Krishi, one of you did, that he's only got a 50% English aptitude. So when we say he's got an 11th grade education, that really is not fair because it's not evaluating apples to apples, and we can't equate that to what an English-speaking person would know at 11 years of high school education. As a positive, he's always had employment. I'm going to look at any remorse, repentance, or cooperation. Even when he told one of the investigators that he couldn't cope with the grief or the guilt, instead of then coming forward and owning up to what had happened, hopefully minimizing the family's suffering, he fled to Missouri, started a new family. I think the PSI writer, when she commented about Mr. Garcia not being transparent, I think that she was kind of referring to the way that the facts, as Mr. Garcia wanted us to know, were presented to her. I'm not sure, but I take that and agree with her to some point. There's still a lot of questions we don't have answers to, a lot of things that just don't make sense to me. And of course, her comment that she was terribly upset by him telling her that accidents happen, that's life. Well, it's a true statement, I guess, but it certainly doesn't reflect how vicious this particular, quote, accident, end of quote, happened. I've got to look at his close rehabilitative needs. As I mentioned, up to a point, this is very fact sensitive, but on the other hand, he certainly has, I think, issues with anger. Rights to the public, a little bit of a concern there because of his prior conviction and this action. And again, as I mentioned, he had a plan. Maybe not before the incident, but certainly after the incident. He went on websites to look at how fast a body would decompose, how to get back into Mexico, things like that, that he had a plan. He's been held now in custody 530 some days, I was told, 525 days. This case presents no statutory aggravating factors, but certainly You can't get a crime of this type appear to be any more aggravated than this, as far as the court's concerned. There are no mitigating factors, as everybody's pointed out. There are none. Sir, I go through this process because a sentence for you is very unique to you. It's a very personal thing. As counsel has pointed out, I'm supposed to do all this and then impose the minimum amount of confinement that's necessary and consistent with protecting the public, addressing the gravity of the offense. The PSI writer for the state again indicated that the crime was indescribable. And the ramifications of that crime are, of course, being felt yet today, almost 5 years after the fact. And it'll be affecting everybody going forward for a lifetime. Your daughter, Rosalie's daughter. I've got to consider your characteristics. Again, we're 5 years, almost 5 years after the fact. I think the fact that you were on the run for 4 years speaks volumes about your character. Confinement is necessary. Everybody agrees with that. Correctional treatment in custody. I'd like to think anger management would be appropriate. And as I've got to address this, but it's just in passing, to even consider probation unduly depreciates the seriousness of this offense. I read through these things, folks, the victim impact statements, and I understand dad and sister's concern. How do you tell a 9-year-old her mother was murdered? How do you tell a 9-year-old her mom's not coming back? I don't have an answer for that. But Mr. Dominguez-Garcia, I think that the appropriate sentence here is 40 years in the system, 25 in, 15 out. I will note that that's more than the PSI writer indicated, but I think it warrants, your actions warrant your responsibility to the crime. I think that all warrants that sentence. I will adopt the DOC's list of conditions of ES, including restitution. So far I know about with the surcharge, $11,155.20. If anybody wants to change that in the next 90 days, let us know. We know when the event occurred. If he hasn't already provided the DNA sample, he should do so. Any treatment deemed appropriate by his agent to maintain absolute sobriety, although I don't know what alcohol, I don't think it was related to this offense, but I'll adopt to no bars, liquor stores, or taverns, and to have no contact with the victim or her family, victim's family, or the residents. Mr. Dominguez-Garcia, that's my sentence. This makes you a felon. You can't possess a firearm, obviously. Anything else, Mr. Newell? 525 days credit if I didn't say that.
Yeah, and I just want to, I don't know if the defense confirmed this or not, but the body can be released as of this.
And I will order the body to be released to her family here today. Counsel, anything else?
No, thank you, Your Honor. No, Your Honor.
I got to tell you, folks, well argued, but you can't get away from the viciousness of this crime in my mind. We're done. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
No, no.
Sure, we're going to go through room then.
I think Ben took care of our 11 o'clock.
did at 11.
It's signed over there.
Brian. Brian. Give it a read. How do you guys stay without dehydrated? How do you help from not being dehydrated?
Your Honor, I'm glad that we have those hard of hearing devices. Otherwise, it would have been really hard to be able to hear everything because it's a huge goal.
We'd be here for the whole day if we didn't have that. We'd be here for the whole day for
Yes,
pauses and
especially-
stuff, you know?
Exactly. But also the